Hello, Econ students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have some of your notes for Chapter 2, Section 1. And for this chapter, we're actually going to break this down into two parts. We're going to take a look at a couple different things here to start with, and then we'll have a second video with the second half so that it isn't necessarily a completely long video that we're going to have here. So we're going to talk a little bit about economic systems and then eventually about the decision making. And to start with, when we talk about economic systems, this is basically an organized way in which society provides for the wants and needs of its people. And it can be very simple, like traditional economies. This is an economic system in which the allocation of scarce resources and other economic allocations are based on rituals, habits, or customs. So it may not necessarily be much more than maybe a little bit beyond like the hunting and gathering. If you had a little more surplus, you could trade off and barter those different kinds of items that you wanted and needed. Some advantages. Everyone knows which roles they play. There's no uncertainty about what is going to be produced. There's little uncertainty about how you're going to produce it because it's all based on customs. And the for whom, when we talk about those basic economic questions, is always determined by customs or traditions of that society. And if your society is more kin related, it could be basically your immediate family. Disadvantages. Okay, it discourages new ideas and ways of doing things because that's just not the way we have done it. There's strict rules that have an effect on punishing people who, for the most part, act differently or break rules. There's a lack of progress that can lead to economic stagnation and perhaps a lower standard of living. Command economies. Command economies basically are economies that have a central authority. It makes major economic decisions, such a king, a dictator, maybe some presidents. These are the people that are the head of the economy that make decisions. Maybe if you are familiar with movies like The Hunger Games, that might be an example of that. But characteristics, a pure command economy, the government will make all the major decisions. And in this day and age, there's only a handful of governments that really probably could be called command economies. And if you take a look here, you've got North Korea, you've got Cuba, Belarus, Laos, Libya, Iran, Myanmar, Turkmenistan. All of those would be probably the last. When we talk about countries like China, they've kind of moved beyond the command economy, but years and years ago, they probably would have fallen into that. Same with the Soviet Union. Anyway, command economies severely limit private property ownership or rights. Individual freedom is limited, and the government officials tend to favor themselves when they make economic decisions. So for the most part, they're the ones who are actually benefiting. Advantages. It can change economic directions of a country drastically. Most citizens are able to afford or provided health and perhaps maybe even public services. So when we talk about guys like Karl Marx, who was always trying to, try to look out for the proletariat, this might sound good, but in the long run, there can be some problems. So some of the disadvantages, they tend to ignore the basic wants and needs of the consumers. So even though some of the basic needs are being met, you may have other wants and needs that are never going to be fulfilled because the government can't do that. This gives people the incentive to work towards fulfilling a quota instead of producing an excellent product. So this concept of we get paid the same, regardless of if the product works or not, leads to really kind of the lack of innovation. And it could really endanger an entire economic system. Command economies require large decision-making bureaucracies, that's like governments, which result in slow decision-making and also raised production cost. So it's not necessarily something that you're looking at efficiency by any means. Planning bureaucracies for the most part, they lack the flexibility to deal with the minor day-to-day problems, and hence some things may go unresolved for a long period of time. Rewards for individual incentives or initiative are rare. So if I have a creative idea, if I'm a hard worker, I'm rarely ever going to be rewarded for those kind of things. Market economies. A market economy is where the people have the freedom to start any business that they wish. Supply and demand and price systems help people make economic decisions and allocate resources. And markets, for the most part, most places are a place where we have people that meet, or a mechanism that allows our buyers and sellers to come together. Some characteristics of the market economy: the big one is freedom. People can spend their money on the products that they want the most, voting with their dollars. Consumers, for the most part, not governments, are deciding the questions about what to produce. Businesses are free to decide how they're going to go about producing things. For whom to produce is decided by the consumer, who earns and spends out there in the marketplace. Private ownership of resources. Capitalism, which is basically part of the market economy, is an economic system in which private citizens own and use the factors of production in order to generate products or profits. Thank you very much.